time I've been introduced here, so that's nice. Good evening, and welcome as well. We know it's not easy to leave a warm house, comfortable couch, and whatever it is that was calling your name from the fridge. So meaningful that you are here. I definitely want to thank Amalia and Lisa for spearheading this and for your persistence to make sure that this happened, and to the Congregation Road of Shalom for sponsoring it. So, appreciate that and your generosity. Tonight, or actually today, was the 19th day of the Hebrew month of Kislev. It's a day that's really about focusing on clarity and light in the world. Sometimes it's called the Rosh Hashanah, the New Year of Hasidus. But really what it's about is reminding us that when we understand things more deeply, we see life and we see ourselves a little bit differently as well. So I think it's appropriate tonight that we're gaining a deeper understanding of a chapter in history that most of us never really got to hear firsthand. Our guest tonight, Bruce Brill, lived this story from the inside. He was an NSA analyst during the tense lead up to the Yom Kippur War. He saw events unfold in real time, not only hearing about it from Dan Rather or Walter Cronkite, but he had a unique perspective from behind the scenes, in one of the most sensitive intelligence environments in the world. And later on, he continued digging into the story as a journalist and a researcher in Israel. And his research and his book sheds light on how decisions were made and how information flowed during that critical period. Bruce has a well-earned reputation for honesty, for clarity, and for down-to-earth storytelling as he explores moments that are usually wrapped in mystery or politics. He helps us understand, not only observe, and so again, I think that's very much in the spirit of Yud-Tes Kislev, the 19th of Kislev. So thank you again for being here. Settle in, get comfortable, and please join me in giving a warm Fairfield welcome to our guest, author, former NSA analyst, and someone with a unique story to share. Brill?
Because it's a story that has been heavy on my heart for over a half a century now. How did that happen? I grew up not far from here, across the Long Island Sound, and I'll give you a little bit of background just so you know where I'm coming from. And just so I know where some of you are coming from, how many of you are Israelis? Okay. Picture on the screen is maybe a funny place to start the story about my work 52 years ago at NSA. You probably recognize this man because he's been in the news almost constantly for the last 2 years. This is General Aharon Haliba. He was the head of what's called Aman, or Israeli military intelligence. And he is a central figure in the horror that happened on October 7th. What does October 7th have to do with October 6th? So you recognize General Aharon Haliba, but you might not recognize a gentleman that's standing next to me in this photo. Here's a close-up. You don't recognize him, do you? That's the same man. He was disguised. I've been in constant touch with him for the past almost a year. And I met him only once, but I correspond with him weekly. Why he came in disguise, because there are at least 1,200 family members of people that were killed on October 7th, and many dozens more who either fell in the 2-year battle or were wounded that would like to see him eliminated. That's why he's in disguise. Now getting back to me. I grew up across the Long Island Sound in Commack, Long Island. My parents Jewish, but both my parents absolutely, totally secular. Thank you. And I had no tendency to be a Zionist. My parents were not Zionists, they were not religious. Main concern for a young man growing up on Long Island, graduating high school, going to college, was to avoid the draft. Those of you that are Israelis, you may not know what draft means. It's giyus. And we were involved with the Vietnam War. It was a very unpopular war, and most all of the young men my age at that time did not want to be sent to Vietnam. There were some that did, but they were a small minority. While I was in college, I had a college deferment. After college, I began teaching school in a low socioeconomic area on Long Island, and I had an occupational deferment. It was a very strong deferment because I was a teacher. However, in 1970, a lottery was instituted, the draft lottery. And lucky me, I won the lottery, won quote unquote. My number 51, I'll never forget it. I knew that I had several choices because Uncle Sam was about to grab me and pull me off into the army. You could run away. You could run away to Canada. You could avoid the draft by getting different other kinds of deferments. Or you could let Uncle Sam draft you for 2 years, and the likelihood of being sent to Vietnam was very strong, and the likelihood of coming back alive was less strong. And so you tried to avoid being sent to Vietnam if you knew that you had to go into the army. What do? You take a battery of tests, pre-enlistment tests, find out what you're good at, and try and nail down a job that would keep you far away from the jungles of Vietnam. And I aced the language aptitude test. And they offered me language of my choice: Laotian, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Chinese, Arabic, thank you. They offered me language of my choice, and I took Arabic, and I knew that I would be going into ASA, Army Security Agency. And first, basic training, that's what this is. You see the cadre. These were our sergeants. And I won't take up too much time telling you about different highlights of basic training, but I was sent to the Presidio of Monterey in California for a 47-week Arabic language course. And we were stationed in these barracks that were built as temporary barracks during World War II. I see some people shaking their heads, yes. We still used them in 1971 and 72 when I was sent there. And when my son, my youngest son, was bar mitzvah, and I took him on a road trip, that's what he requested, we stopped by the Presidio of Monterey, and they're still using them. And this was when he was 13, he's 30 now, so that was 17 years ago, they were still using them. I want to tell you about this gentleman. His name is Merwan. Now, Israelis probably identify the name Merwan, or if you're well studied on the Yom Kippur War, there was an Egyptian double agent who was working for Israeli intelligence. And he alerted the Israelis about the Egyptian plan to attack Israel. And his name was Merwan. But this guy's name was Merwan too, and you see he's wearing an American Army uniform. He was a hillbilly from the hills of Colorado, and he was very talented in language. And he was the best in our language class, the absolute best. However, because he loved languages, before he went in the Army, he took a trip to Mexico to immerse himself in the Spanish language. And while in Mexico, he ran out of money, and he found out that there's a program, a work-study program in Cuba. You work half a day and you study Spanish half a day, and it sounded good. He ran out of money. So he wanted to get some information on it. He walked into the Cuban embassy in Mexico City, got some information, and in the end, he didn't take advantage of it. He went home. Why am I telling you this obscure thing? At the end of our Arabic language class, we were given our BI, another acronym, background investigation, to check to see if you might not be a security risk. I got my BI, passed it with flying colors, but Merwan, the best student in our class, didn't pass his BI. Why? They asked him if he ever had any contact with a communist official, and he answered no. But he walked in the Cuban embassy and walked out again with a brochure. Somehow, American security knew this, and he lied. It wasn't really a lie, it was a white lie. Or he forgot that he walked in and walked out. But they caught him in a lie, and he didn't get his security clearance. Just to show you how meticulous American security is, and if you're going to be working at NSA, not the NSA, at NSA, you have to be checked and clean and kosher, totally kosher. And because of that little white lie, he couldn't get his security clearance. This becomes relevant later in the story. After language school, we were sent to Goodfellow Air Force Base. It says, no cameras or photographing permitted in this area. So of course, I had someone take my picture next to that sign. Shobav. So we had several weeks of security training at Goodfellow Air Force Base. And then we were sent to this place. This is how it looked back in 1972 when we were stationed at NSA, not the NSA. This is outside of Washington in Fort Meade. Took cryptological courses, and I was a crypto as well as other things. And my work at NSA at the beginning took about maybe 20 minutes. What was I doing? I was mapping out Israeli overflights of southern Lebanon and southwest Syria and northern Jordan. That was my job. And it took about 20 minutes. But I'm there for 9 hours. And so my real job was to look busy for the rest of those 8.5 hours. And what did I do? I began something novel for me to learn Hebrew. It was kind of a joke at NSA at that time, because years before, in the 1960s, when the United States NSA spied on Israel, they couldn't let their linguists say that they were Hebrew linguists, because it's not nice to spy on friends. And Israel was publicly America's friend. So Hebrew linguists were told to say that they were special Arabic linguists. That was somehow kosher. And I began learning Hebrew, and then found out that this hippie, you see this hippie with his arm raised? That hippie was the head of the Hebrew division. I wasn't allowed to say his name in my book, so it's blacked out. His nickname was Uncle Leo. All his friends called him Uncle Leo. He was basically a hippie, but a genius, a linguistic genius. And he bragged that he almost aced the language aptitude test. He got 61 out of 62. I told him, I got 62 out of 62. But he was head and shoulders above any ability that I had. He spoke Chinese, and he spoke most European languages, and he, after I left him at NSA, he became the head of the Arabic division as well, a real genius and a lovely guy. And he was looking for a roommate at this time. I said, wow, I'm learning Hebrew, I'm trying to learn Hebrew, and he's the best show on the block. So I became his roommate, and we became close friends. And you see him here at this demonstration. It was a pro-Israeli demonstration in Washington. And who is he standing next to? That blonde is my sister. They were going out. So we were really very close. My book, when I was through writing the manuscript, I took a deep breath and I sent it to the Pentagon. They have a pre-publication review office, and they took 4 months to review the book, and they said, now you can publish it. You have our authorization under 2 conditions. 1, redact what we require you to redact. And I showed this here. This was the biggest section. Throughout the book, you see redactions of different place names, mostly place names that they didn't want exposed. This is the biggest section, and there's really very little under that blacked out section that's critical to my story here. So I can tell you everything, but what's under there, and I'm telling you, what's under there is not critical. So 2 conditions: to redact what they require, and not to add 1 new word of content. It's logical. But after they gave me permission, 3 items came up that I wanted to include in the book. One of them was that there was a protocol of Moshe Dayan that was released from IDF military archives just at that moment. And in that protocol, and you can read about it in the book, Moshe Dayan says, on October 7, 1973, 1 day into the war, that he received intelligence assessments from the Americans 12 hours 12 hours before the attack began the day before, 12 hours that the Arabs are not getting ready to attack. Not going to attack. 12 hours. That's one thing. Another thing was I had the opportunity to interview Shmulik Pfefferman. He was a kashav. I don't even know how to say that in English. A monitor, someone who monitors live communication. And this guy was targeting Syria. And this Shmulik Pfefferman picked up 3 indications that the Syrians were going to attack the following day, within 24 hours. And he passed it on to the head of Israeli military intelligence and was ignored. And the third thing is, my sister, the blondie there, went on a dating site, and one of the fellows looking to find a partner visited her at her apartment in Tekoa, Israel. Big tall fellow, like 2 meters tall, from Texas, of course. And we got talking a little bit. He said he was in the American Army. I said, wow, so was I. When were you in? 71 to 74. So was I. Who did you work for? What unit? He said, NSA. I said, what? So was I. How come I never saw you? He was out in the field, and he was stationed in Germany at the time. And early in October, his whole unit was restationed, and where, I can't say because the Pentagon didn't want that revealed, but somewhere in Germany to somewhere in Italy to get ready for a war that was going to take place. And he asked his officer, we're sharing this with our Israeli allies, right? And his officer said, that's not your job to ask. In other words, he didn't get an answer, which meant, in other words, they weren't sharing the vital, critical intelligence with the Israelis. During the course of the war, he says, we are sharing this live intelligence with the Israelis, right? Again, he got the same answer. He was so troubled because he realized that this was critical, essential intelligence that was kept from the Israelis. After he was discharged, he converted to Judaism. He was not Jewish. He converted to Judaism. You're all sitting down. He made Aliyah to Israel, and he renounced his American citizenship. He was so terribly troubled by this deceit. And so I interviewed him. I wanted to put his story in my book too. So I sent it back to the Pentagon, and it took an additional 2-month review. So my book is unique in that it had been approved twice for publication by the Pentagon. Twice. Okay, Uncle Sam, we at NSA, the Arabic linguists, were assigned to the 82nd Airborne. This is when the Soviets were threatening to intervene on behalf of the Arabs. And Nixon said, you intervene and we're going to intervene. You watch out. And he put us on red alert, and he assigned, the Army assigned us Arabic linguists to the 82nd Airborne. I never jumped out of a plane, but they were going to push me out of a plane to be with the 82nd Airborne that was going to land in the Sinai. And so Uncle Sam was concerned about any Jewish soldier that would be sent to fight Arabs. So, very similar to my dad in World War II. Here it says Jewish on my dog tag, but when I was about to be sent into Egypt to fight Arabs, I got a dog tag that said Protestant. Thank you, Uncle Sam. Can you see this, Israelis? This is a letter I got from Moshe Dayan. This is a little kind of an aside. During the Yom Kippur War, it became clear that the Israelis lost a lot of vital armaments. And Kissinger and Schlesinger and Weinberger and all of that crowd with Jewish names were preventing the resupply to get to Israel. Who jumped in and saved Israel? It was Nixon, of all people. He was no particular friend of the Jews, but he asked Kissinger, according to Alexander Haig, did the Israelis give you their wish list? And Kissinger said, yes, I have it here in my pocket. Nixon said, double it, do it right away, get out of here. Nixon, of all people. So, at the time, Israel was really hurting for weapons. And I had this bright idea. I know you want to get to question and answers, and I see the time is about up, but I'll tell you this quick. I had the idea to send Moshe Dayan a rugatka. Am I saying it right? Right? But there's an actual word for it.
Yeah.
A sling.
A slingshot.
A sling, not a slingshot, but a sling that David used against Goliath. So I made a nice one. I was very good at making these things, and I was well practiced at it. So I figured this will be a nice joke. I'll send this to Moshe Dayan. I said in my fledgling Hebrew that a weapon like this once came in very handy in Israel's military history. And I was being even cuter. I said, the Bible says that David hit Goliath between the eyes. I said, really, he hit him between the legs. But it wasn't polite to mention in a holy book. I wish you good luck against Sadat. And so I sent this to him. He wrote me back. He wrote me back, and you can see on the letter that it has a serial number, that it was actually registered. And recently, like a couple years ago, I wanted to see the letter that this responds to, because I forgot exactly what I wrote. And they said they couldn't find the letter. He received the gift. He's acknowledging that he received the gift, and they can't find this letter, even with the serial number. And now they're, you know what they're doing to Netanyahu, because he received the gift. Anyway, for you folks that want a laugh out of this, a couple weeks after I got the letter from Moshe Dayan, I got this letter from his secretary. And if you can't read it in the back, I'll read it to you. Dear sir, I have been asked to acknowledge with thanks the receipt of the eye patch that you were so kind to forward to the Minister of Defense. An evaluation that was presented to any worker that worked at NSA, not the NSA. And you can see E-E-O-E-O-O. O is outstanding and E is excellent. It's wonderful, right? But I I was issued one by my immediate supervisor, who was a Jew hater. A Jew hater. And it was so horrible that the middle management saw that this guy was dumping on the Jew boy. And so they had someone that outranked him to write this evaluation that replaced his bad one. I mean, it was terrible. A hill climb. A friend of mine came out when I was in Arabic language school at the Presidio with his Jeep, and he challenged me to a hill climb. I had a motorcycle, and I wrenched my back in this hill climb, and I was going for treatment every now and then for a wrenched neck. And on October 4th, you remember October 6th is the day the Yom Kippur War began. On October 4th, on a Thursday, I went in for a typical treatment, but I arranged it so that the treatment would be around 2 o'clock, so that I could take off from work and beat the pakak, the traffic jam in the Baltimore tunnel, so I can get home for the Yom Kippur weekend. I get a call down to the clinic, and the nurse says, "Specialist Brill, you have a call at the desk." I go to the desk and I pick up the black phone, and it's my supervisor, the one that wrote me the bad eval. And he says, "You're planning to go home this weekend, right?" I said, "Yeah, I got your permission to take off from the medical clinic." He said, "Don't even think about going home." Now, I apologize to the women in the audience, but this is his language. "Don't even think about going home, because the shit hits the fan on Saturday, and if you go home, I'll be calling your young ass right back down to your work." The war broke out on Saturday, and on Saturday, I was at my desk working on Yom Kippur. And what I was doing was, because I could gist Arabic and gist Hebrew, they had me working as again, kashav, a monitor of what was going on in the battlefield around the Suez Canal. And I was picking up Arabic and Hebrew, and anything that had military content, my job was to record it. That's the way intelligence was processed. You record something with military content, it's sent to the transcribers, it's transcribed, and then it's sent to translation, and then it's sent to the analysis, and then summations are made, and this is how it's processed. But the first step is for somebody like me to record. The rest is history. After I got my honorable discharge, almost immediately I went to Israel. This letter that I wrote 20 years after the war to the head of NSA security. And I said, I discovered when I was working there that there are rooms in NSA that were off limits to me because I was a Jew. How I discovered that, you'll have to read my book. It's an interesting story. So I asked him, is that policy still in force today, 20 years after? What was his response? Non-response. The following year, I wrote another letter, and I said, I didn't get a response. Is the policy of maintaining rooms that are off limits to Jews still in force? And I got the same non-answer. And I discovered from John Loftus, who wrote a book called The Secret War Against the Jews, that this cabal is known as the Jew Room. And John Loftus interviewed people that were members of the Jew Room. And he says that the name the Jew Room is an absolute misnomer. Number one, because Jews are not allowed admittance. they're not even allowed to know that such rooms exist. And number 2 or 3, it's not one room. It's not singular, the Jew room. It's multiple rooms. What do they do there? They work against Israel. Now, when I was writing my book, I wanted to know, does the Jew room still exist? Can I get an answer to these letters? And this is not 20 years after, this is 45 years after. At the time, I had residence in California. Nominal residence, because I was living in Israel. But I asked my congressman, does the Jew room still exist? And the answer I got back from my congressman is that the Jew room had been dismantled. So I wanted to know, when was it dismantled? And can you give me proof that it was actually dismantled? They couldn't. They couldn't. And after October 7th, my suspicion is that it was never dismantled. Because what happened 50 years, almost to the day, prior to October 7th, smells like it happened again. And I can go into detail about why I believe that, because I've been in touch with that same Aharon Haliva that I began the talk addressing. Q&A.
Aharon Haliva is in the news these days. He has been for the past 2 years, being responsible for 2,000 dead and 20,000 injured because of this war. And there's an idea now by the news in Israel trying to kosherize Haliva. Is that what you're trying to do with this thing, or you're trying to just tell us a little bit that he...
Okay. So Haliva, on Thursday, he was on his way to a lot to take a vacation for the weekend. In Hebrew, you say Shishi Shabbat, Friday, Saturday. That's the weekend in Israel. And he stopped by an intelligence base right on the Gaza border. And the intelligence officer there said, there's goings on. There are goings on. What are you going to do? He was so sure that nothing was going to happen. And even on October 6th in the evening, there were reports coming through. They were trying to contact him. He was on vacation in Eilat. And he said, nothing is going to happen. Leave me alone. And even on October 7th, in the early morning before the attack began, same thing. He was so sure that nothing was going to happen. Why was he so sure? I hearkened back to my visit. I was invited to visit at his home Eli Ze'ira. Who was Eli Ze'ira? He was the head of Israeli military intelligence back in '73. He invited me to his home a couple times, and he confided in me that he received an American intelligence assessment prior to the beginning of the war. The Arabs are not going to attack. And he relied on that. And that's why he, with his tremendous power of persuasion, convinced Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan and David Elazar, the chief of staff, Dado, nothing is going to happen. Why did he believe nothing was going to happen? When there were all kinds of signs that something was about to happen? Because of the American intelligence assessment that he got. And he relied on that above his own people's intelligence. That's why I think that Aharon Haliva also got assurances from American intelligence. And I asked Aharon Haliva, because I'm in touch with him, and he said, Israeli intelligence was much stronger than American intelligence. He would never have relied on American intelligence.
We also built a concept that went from 20 years that we have it, figured it out. We spent $1 billion on that electronic fence jumbo mumbo that was taken down by D9.
And
There's a
the
lot more
girl
than the
spotters,
American.
the whole Gaza fence was lined with Israeli girl soldiers that were spotters, and they were trying to alert headquarters that something is happening. And Aharon Haliva wrote to me, none of the spotters reported anything out of the ordinary. But everyone is saying that he did. So somebody is lying.
Do you find things in the intelligence community very compartmentalized with state?
Okay, that's another
CIA,
story. But not only is it
NSA?
compartmentalized, but if you don't have a need to know, you can't ask. Just like this American from Texas was told, you don't have a need to know. You can't ask that question.
Well, which agencies were sending the communications to Israel?
Right, so you don't know what the guy working alongside of you, unless you have a need to know, you can't ask him hey, what are you doing? It's very, very compartmentalized. Sir?
You are basically saying, and I think in your book you said that people in NSA knew that there was going to be an attack on October 6th before the attack occurred. And somehow that information did not get to the Israelis.
Right.
Why didn't it get to the Israelis? What happened to that information en route to
Okay.
whoever it should have gotten to, who would have given it to the Israelis?
Good question. And this is what I believe. I knew Thursday. I didn't mention this. I said that I knew that the attack was going to happen, and I knew that it was going to happen on Saturday. I knew that because my supervisor told me. But one thing that I didn't tell you was what was the degree of validity. So, because earlier that year, there were several false alarms. So I told him, when I'm speaking to him, I mentioned a black phone. I picked up a black phone because we had several false alarms. In January, February, and May, there were false alarms. There were Egyptian and Syrian army movements, and the Israelis even called up reserves at one time, and it's very costly. And so this time, I said, certainly this is another false alarm. I said to my supervisor, and he said, no, this time it's AVAL, another acronym, meaning no doubt, this time it's going to happen for real. So that was the degree of validity. Okay, now getting back to the black phone. He disclosed this to me over a black phone. You can't disclose any classified information at the agency over a black phone. That's only for external calls. And that's what he did. I could have, theoretically, I could have gone to the Israeli embassy or called them up and tried to alert them. If I suspected that we weren't sharing this vital intelligence with our ally. But that wasn't my job. In the National Intelligence Committee, generals that Eli Zaira was in touch with, and this he pointed out to me in his kitchen, that they already was duped. And why do I believe that? Because I told Eli Zaira, apparently these American generals that you were in touch with, and he wouldn't disclose who they were, they duped you. And he said, no. They were lovers of Israel and they were loyal. What does that mean? It means they were duped. They already were duped by the folks in the Jew room. That's my suspicion. I don't know that for 100% certainty, but I'm pretty sure.
So the Jew room blocked the information from going to the right people? Prevented
Well,
the
it was
use of-
tampered with. It was tampered with. And this is something I talk about in my book too. How do I know that it was tampered with? Because there were documents released, summation documents, that I didn't see. And neither did anyone, because had we seen this, that NSA didn't know that the Arabs were going to attack. During the 1975, there was a Pike Committee investigating not specifically the Yom Kippur War, but in general, how money is budgeted and misspent in the intelligence collection. And they dealt with like a half a dozen different screw-ups. And one of them was NSA. And you'll see in my book, an intelligence assessment that was prepared by the CIA for distribution here and there was distributed not to anyone in the State Department, except with the exception of a Dr. Ray Klein, not a Jew, Dr. Ray Klein, who testified before the Pike Committee. Attack plan eluded all the American intelligence agencies, which is garbage. And you'll see in my book, I have, besides me, 4 other analysts that knew not 2.5 days before, like I did, but 4 days before, a week before, and a week and a half before I knew. And my supervisor and the middle management certainly knew before me. I think they were keeping the Jew in the dark. He testifies to Congress, the Arabs eluded. The Arabs fooled all the American intelligence agencies. A lie, an out-and-out lie. This is what inspired me to call General Eli Zahira, and he invited me to his home twice.
The rationale for Israel keeping this information
For US.
It's not
From
the
Israel.
US, yeah.
From
US
Israel. Okay, when you say the U.S., the U.S. is a big place. I mean, Connecticut is a big place. The U.S. is a big place. The U.S. Army is a big place. NSA is a big place. You saw that my immediate supervisor tried to screw the Jew boy, but other people came to my rescue. So you can't say the U.S. kept it. This is the Jew room crowd, this cabal, which is secret within the most secret place in the world, and they are funded by the American taxpayer, by you people. Your taxes go to fund the Jew room crowd inside NSA that work against 2 things: an American ally and work against American stated policy. What could be more un-American than that? And that's why I feel a compulsion to rid the intelligence community of this un-American cancer.
So you say it's just anti-Semitism, or what?
Yeah, good old-fashioned Jew
You
hatred.
don't think there's some geopolitical?
And that's one thing that I learned from my Arab teachers in Arabic language school. You can't say anti-Semitism. Don't use that word, because Arabs are Semites. The Jew hatred, good old-fashioned Jew hatred. Sir,
It seems you think American intelligence might have known about October 7th from 2 years ago. It seems you're indicating that they may have known that.
okay, I'll
But
repeat
let
the
me
question.
let me ask you this: if they didn't know about the attack on their own country, 9/11, despite intelligence and information and shadow, they couldn't diagnose that. Why would you think they could diagnose an attack 6,000 miles away from a foreign country. Just doesn't seem logical to me.
Okay, did you hear the question? Yeah, okay. I think, and I deal with this in my book, about relative resources, intelligence resources. American intelligence resources, you saw how NSA looked. I showed you a picture of this huge complex in Fort Meade. I mean, thousands of people. I described how many people. I don't remember offhand now, but it's all in the book. Huge complex. How much more budget is relegated to American intelligence as opposed to Israel? Is it twice as much? Is it 3 times as much? 4 times? 5? 10? Is it 10 times as much? 20? 83 times as much. And I'll give you an example of the capacity of American intelligence. Back then, in 73, there was a man that I became friendly with in Israel, Shabtai Brill. Shabtai Brill was the pioneer of drone overflights to collect intelligence. What did he do? He bought American toy planes that were remotely controllable. It was something new at the time in the late 60s when he began this. And he would affix cameras to the toy planes. He would send them over the Suez Canal and take some photographs of Egyptian military installations across the canal with these crappy planes and, less than ideal cameras. And he was collecting intelligence, and he saw what was going on, kind of. How far could these planes go? A few hundred yards? At the same time, this is 1974, not exactly 73, it's 1974, I saw in NSA photographs of Israeli military installation in the Sinai where I could read the name of the soldier off of his kippah. And we had these satellites anywhere. They could monitor anywhere in the entire Sinai, compared to Shabtai Brill's toy planes going across the Suez Canal. So, yeah, I think I would be surprised if American military intelligence did not know about October 7th 2 years ago. One thing that I forgot to tell you, I have books in the back for sale, and they're $20 a piece. And I have PayPal. I'll give you my Israeli phone number if you want to pay with PayPal or give me a check. I have no way of taking credit cards.
You can take credit cards from PayPal.
Okay.
I
Yes,
just-
ma'am.
I know you don't know anything for sure, but I'm just curious about, is his name Haliva?
Yeah.
What do you think his motivation was? I mean, he must care
Oh.
about Israel and Israelis. So why did he lie, if he lied? And where is he getting, are you suggesting maybe he was getting intelligence from America that he chose to believe? But then why would
Right. He won't. Okay. 2 things. He won't admit it. And I asked him. I'm in touch with him. I correspond with him. His witness. And then you saw all my correspondence that goes on for some months now. I asked him, can you put me in touch with the person in Amman that had contact with the Americans? I want to talk to him.
Amman being the Israeli organization, the Israeli intelligence.
Military.
Yeah, yeah. And he said, "Lo yet. It's not going to happen." So he's keeping me insulated from getting an answer. And he himself is not going to answer. I told him, and this is interesting, that Eli Zaira was not responsible for what happened on October 6th in 1973. He was duped. But he is responsible for what happened on October 7th 2 years ago. Why?
Is it here? Because
Why? And I also told Haliva that you're not responsible for what happened on October 7th. Everyone is pointing accusative fingers at Aharon Haliva, but not me, because I think he was duped. But why do I say that Eli Zaira, who died 2 weeks ago, by the way, why do I say that Eli Zaira is responsible not for what happened on October 6th, but what happened on October 7th? Sounds strange, right?
no, I didn't.
And this goes back to John Loftus, the author of The Secret War Against the Jews, with whom I'm in contact. Lovely, lovely man, non-Jewish, who was the head of the Holocaust Museum in Florida. But he has a passion, he has a heart for the Jewish people. He said, get Eli Zaira to agree to be interviewed on 60 Minutes, because he had contact with the team of 60 Minutes. Get him to come out and disclose this intelligence assessment that he confided in me, that the Arabs are not going to attack. This has to be made public. Were it made public, then the people in Amman would have been sensitive to not trust American intelligence assessments. It could have prevented October 7th. Not only that, but many of you Israelis may have heard of Dr. Uri Milstein. He's an Israeli military historian. He's written many books on Israeli military history. He said, not me, he said that had I been successful in getting my book out and distributed and to the awareness of people in Amman, it would have prevented October 7th.
So maybe I'm naive, but are the Americans, do you think, or no, are they collecting that much intelligence on Gaza, which is part of Israel? It's not like the Arabs, which are different countries against Israel attacking, but this is Gaza. So I would have just assumed before all this that Israel knows much more about what's going on in Gaza than America does, but I don't know.
It would seem that way, right? And that's exactly what Aharon Haliva told me.
But then,
So if it's true, why
I
didn't
was
he know?
believing, yeah, right.
Right, it doesn't make sense, does it?
If you consider that this could be incompetence or malice, for example, when information is being shared between agencies, it creates a risk, not just for, it creates a risk for the person who shared information, because it depends on the speed, it can reveal their sources if the person creating the information has a leak. So have you considered that maybe they tried NSA, not they tried to time it, but in the process of timing it, they screwed up.
Right, okay, so that was my initial assumption. Did you hear what he said in the back? He said maybe it was just inefficiency. Maybe it wasn't malice. And
Tried to time it, so maybe they need 2 days notice, wait, because if you reveal it so
Right.
quickly.
Right. I hear what you're saying. That was my initial assumption. As an American, and I love America, my assumption was that somehow the intelligence, the vital intelligence that didn't get to the Israelis, I assumed in time, that somehow it was screwed up in the bureaucratic transfer of the intelligence. That was my assumption. For years, and as a matter of fact, John Loftus, when he wrote his book, there's one mistake in the book in John Loftus's book, The Secret War Against the Jews. What's the mistake? What I shared with him from my own naive, giving the benefit of the doubt. I said that somehow we didn't get the intelligence to the Israelis in time. That was my assumption. And it was wrong. It was wrong, because Eli Zahira admitted to me that he got an intelligence assessment from the Americans, and Moshe Dayan in his protocol also got this assessment from the Americans. Ha'aravim lo omdim litkov. The Arabs are not intending or preparing to attack.
Yeah, speaking of being duped, do you think there's something to be said about the person who was heading NSA at the time October 7th happened, who was, forget his name, but I know he was of Arab descent?
My roommate loved alcohol. And one of the members of our team, the Hebrew linguists, was a girl with a typical American with a Scandinavian last name. Nice girl. She got engaged to a Chinese American. And Uncle Leo was dying to practice his Cantonese, his Chinese. So he arranged for a little social event at a bar to get together and celebrate their engagement. It was very nice to work in the Hebrew department under Uncle Leo. He was lovely. But at this event, he got drunk and he starts talking shop, which is a big, big no-no at the agency. You don't talk shop outside the agency. And he comes over to me and he takes his finger and he pokes it into my chest and he says, there are rooms in NSA that you can't get into because you're a Jew. His conscience was bothering him, and as the alcohol went in, the truth came out. And that's how I did.
Were you able to get any more validation of the
Jew room?
Yeah.
Get John Loftus's book. He goes into detail. He interviewed members of the Jew room. I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.